here we go. Welcome to another episode of Sudden Scrap Nation's podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Jonas, and today's episode is another installment of Sips and Slips. Today we're going to be focusing on Kevin Lee versus Edson Barboza in Atlantic City for UFC Fight Night on, I'm pretty sure, Big Fox, if not FS1. Today is April 18th, 2018, and it is 10 o'clock here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Nice 65-degree weather this morning. So let's get started. We're just going to begin with a little bit of talking about last week's fights. I personally didn't get a chance to watch them live. I watched some of the highlights, so I'll get into a little bit of detail about that. More just getting into what the future holds for Dustin and Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier being the winner of that fight, and a little bit of the other fights going down that card, such as Carlos Condit taking on that late replacement of Oliveira, Cowboy Oliveira, and it not going his way. Before I get into that, remember to like, subscribe, and to follow us on all forms of social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can follow us at Sudden Scrap Nation, and as well as on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Like, subscribe to the podcast. I'd really appreciate that. And you can find us on YouTube as well. That's where this nice video comes from. Hey, everybody. So just to get into it, like I said, I didn't really watch the fights last weekend. I didn't get a chance to, but it's okay because I get the premise of it. Just to break down a little bit of what happened, obviously when Justin Gaethje fights, it's always fight of the year contender, and this was no different. It was fight of the night. Watching back on some of it, obviously these guys have to endure quite a lot to really break down Justin Gaethje, but I think Eddie Alvarez not necessarily put a game plan together, because his game plan didn't really find success till that third round or that second round when he was introducing the body shots. But in this fight, you really saw the difference in footwork, right? Justin Gaethje, or Dustin Poirier, was actually able to get in the in and out movement and tag Justin and be able to work the body, work the head, hit him from different angles. And I think what the difference was that made a big change in Justin's game, or in Dustin's game, allowing him to land those shots, was fighting southpaw, right? If Justin Gaethje wants to attack your leg from the inside, and you both are facing opposite stances, right? One southpaw, one orthodox. That lead leg attack is very hard to do from your power kick, right? From your rear kick. Kicking to the inside, in this case, kicking to Dustin's right leg, opens you up to a right hand or a left hand straight down the middle, because that time it takes to kick from the back leg to the front leg on a southpaw opponent, it can just be nullified by a straight. I mean, most leg kicks can be nullified by a straight or by a hook. However, trying to throw that leg kick from the back, it requires a lot of distance as well. Justin Gaethje is very good at throwing leg kicks on the inside, a very athletic ability of his. But in this case, he's not. He wasn't able to. He had to throw it from the outside, and that just opened up to getting blasted on through the straight down the pipe. And then obviously that sets up the finishing. Had Justin wobbled and then finished him against the cage. I don't know if some people thought that the finish was a little early. I thought it was perfectly timed. I mean, call that fight. Justin doesn't need to take that much damage. I mean, he got wobbled like crazy. And then on top of that, took an onslaught on the cage. It's enough for me. Don't need to see any more. I get it. He's tough. So moving on to that a little bit, Carlos Condit, like I said, he lost his fight to Cowboy. Once again, veteran, or that's short notice. Carlos was talking about retirement before his last fight. So I don't know if he's really focused on fighting as much as he says he loves it. He put out a really nice statement about it. I just think it is his time. He's starting a new coffee company. He's with his family. I mean, if he likes the passion to train, coaching's always an option. He's very analytical. He's very good at breaking things down. There's different options for Carlos. He's a very, like I said, analytical fighter, as well as he's just business savvy as well. he's kept his wits together through even all those wars. That I think he'll do fine in the professional world and continuing on in his life. And then Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori. Excuse me. They had their fight. It was close, split decision call. I have some people that agree that Marvin Vettori, or that agree that Israel Adesanya should have won due to the strikes and the damage he did on the feet. And then I have some people that thought Marvin Vettori won due to the controlling aspect that he had with the grappling. To be honest, I mean, they're probably, they're trying to make Israel look like this new up and coming prospect. So you're gonna get a lot of these. If it is a split decision win, probably go to Israel Adesanya more because his fighting style is exciting. So the judges, granted, these judges are not, where we want judging to be. You're going to get a lot more judges to score for this exciting guy that seems to be landing more damaging blows, as well as not really account for the holding with the ground game or the control. Even though if you've trained, it's very hard, especially if you get a guy with really good underhooks, strong in the clinch. It can be a pain. It can be a real, real pain. And it's taxing. It makes you tired. But Israel's not going to win any fans this way. As much as he won this fight, he lost. Marvin at least won a little bit. Won in the moral aspect, right? He showed that this guy doesn't have good ground game, right? He doesn't have a wrestling base. He doesn't have this crazy takedown defense that Joanna Jędrzejczyk has or Robbie Lawler has, or these guys that are very good and elite strikers, but if you go for a takedown, they just shoot away, or sprawl away, or strip the hands, or do what they need to get away from the takedown, lateral out, and get back to where they're going, and minimize the damage that they take in these clinch positions. You're not seeing that with him. He gets taken down pretty easily by these guys that aren't, you're talking middleweight division. Obviously, he's not to this level, right? But once he gets to the level of, Chris Weidman, Kevin Gastelum even, a lot of these guys are like, no groundwork. Yoel Romero, for Pete's sake. These guys are going to give a shit whether or not he can kick hard, and they're going to just press the action. That's why I personally love MMA. You can be a glory kickboxing champ all you want to. You see the likes of Gokhan Saki coming into the UFC as he won his first fight, but he didn't win it easy. It took him a little bit. Gokhan Saki obviously has an upcoming fight as well. And these guys, the closer and closer that they get to the top, the more and more their game plan is going to be exposed, right? These guys are very good, elite strikers. But when they come to contact with an elite wrestler or an elite grappler or an elite MMA fighter in total, it's going to be very hard to play this, let's stand on the feet game, right? So, what does that mean for Dustin Poirier taking this win last weekend? I personally think that Dustin Poirier, I don't know if he's in line for a title shot because there's so much going on in the very top. Now, if Tony Ferguson's out for 9 months or so due to this leg injury, then let that be. Tony Ferguson's out. We're not going to get a fight for a while. Now, Conor McGregor is the outlaw. Well, he is an outlaw. But is the outlier in this whole thing, right? So, if things go well with him in court, he can deal with everything civilly and just pay everyone off and not take it to court even, and just, settle everything, then maybe we'll see him in there quickly. But if he has to go to court and essentially almost possibly get sent to jail for his actions and get things turned into felonies, it's going to be very, very hard to get him to fight soon, obviously, for obvious reasons. So that kind of just leaves Khabib up in the air. Khabib said that he could take 30 minutes after his last fight and fight again. So he's ready to go. Now, does that mean it's ready for Dustin Poirier to go? Maybe. He is number 4, I think. Yeah, he's number 4. So who's in front of him? Eddie Alvarez is the only one that's in front of him. You could rematch that fight. I would love to see the rematch. I don't know if it gains anything. It doesn't gain anything for Dustin, even though he lost that fight. Um, since it was a draw. Oh no, it was a no contest. Anyway, I don't know if it gains anything for Dustin besides getting that win. We're in a fight that he was winning until that illegal knee happened, or if he just skips it. And I mean, Khabib is down to fight him, or we get Khabib versus Dustin Poirier, which is not a bad idea. Especially, I favor Khabib very heavily in that fight, especially if Khabib can walk through him, and then in this time he's keeping himself active as a lightweight champion, promoting himself as a the legitimate top lightweight champion in the world, since there's three of them right now. And I mean, it's not Tony's fault that he can't fight, but Tony's going to be forgotten about. Conor, if he has to keep on dealing with this legal issues and stuff, he's going to be forgotten about. And that to me is where the issues come about with having three different championships, having these interim championships. Now it's all about, well, if I fight Khabib, then I'm fighting for the championship. Yeah, kind of. It's more you're fighting for a chance to have a chance to fight Conor. Yeah, you have a chance to fight Conor McGregor for the actual championship. So it's just kind of confusing right now, but I could see Dustin and Khabib fighting maybe in Russia, because there's a Russia card in the midst, but it's not a pay-per-view. It's not a pay-per-view. So, anyway, moving on from that, like I said, Dustin Poirier's got a bright future. Justin Gaethje, you can put him against anyone right now. I would stay away from the top. I mean, you can't put him against anyone in top 3. Top 5, I mean, there's Edson Barboza and Kevin Lee, who are about to fight this weekend. You could put him against the loser of that. Or you could potentially put him against, let's see, like not necessarily a feeder, but like a Beneil Dariush, or someone that not necessarily has, that's someone that's coming off a loss, because Justin Gaethje is coming off of 2 back-to-back knockout losses. You might as well give him somebody that will give him a fight, but have a chance of him winning. You don't want to just keep on handing him to these top-level guys to let them just piece him up. Give him a chance to change up his game plan. Give him a chance to get in there against someone that'll give him a fight, but will also give him a challenge, but will also not be too much for him. Build him back up. Because you can't just have a punching bag walking around in the lightweight division and not give him a chance to improve his game, and not give him a chance to, like he said, he only has 5 fights left, if that. So if you're the UFC and you want 5 fight of the year contending fights in available, or cash in on that, then you're going to have to give him good fights, but not necessarily ones that just don't favor him. You know what I mean? He's always going to bring that fan-friendly fighting style, but there are also guys up there in these divisions. Oh, Anthony Pettis would be great. I mean, it wouldn't be great for Anthony Pettis, but these guys that are sitting right there at the top 10, just something to get him back on track. I don't know. Yeah, just something to get him back on track. All right. Other than that, Michelle Waterson won by split decision against Courtney Casey. Just gets her back on the win track. And I'm probably missing one. But anyway, let's get into some MMA news, guys. I'm keeping together today thanks to Pete's Coffee. Pete's Coffee. Also, Ian Edwards. If you're not a fan of comedy but are a fan of Instagram, go on Instagram, look up Ian Edwards. He did a whole thing on Pete's Coffee and Starbucks. It was a great little Instagram post he did. So, giving love to that Pete's Coffee. They're actually like everywhere now, so more popular than I thought they were. All right, let's go. So, fight announcements first, just to get run these through, so you can, not necessarily talk about them, but get you hype and get you pumped for what's coming up in the news. We have Leon Edwards versus Cowboy Cerrone. We already knew that was in the works since it was at the UFC fight presser. They announced that recently. OSP versus Tyson Pedro. It's a good fight for OSP coming off that loss. Tyson Pedro coming up in the game. I like Tyson. Then you have Ricardo Lamas versus Bektik. Yeah, Bektik. Yes, I don't know if it was his most recent loss, or his most recent fight, but he lost to Darren Elkins in that crazy fight where he was winning, and then all of a sudden Darren Elkins comes out of nowhere and head kicks him against the cage and knocks him out. And Marcin Bektik was doing really well in that fight. He's really good. He's one of these top, up and coming 145ers. I think he does work with Ricardo Lamas. I think that's a great fight. It's a very underrated, or not underrated, but not even overlooked fight, considering it just got announced. But it's one of those fights where you look at the two of them and look at where they are in their career right now. You go, all right. Yeah, I mean, Ricardo Lamas coming off that vicious knockout of Josh Emmett, and Marcin Bektik coming off of that vicious knockout from Darren Elkins. He may have gotten in there before that or after that, but I mean, these guys are not necessarily the same kind of fighter, but how do they come back? How do they right that wrong? And that's what you want to see. You want to see them come back in full force. And then the one fight that has me so excited. It's not as exciting as the fight that they were trying to start on Twitter, but I'll take this one. I'll fucking take this fight. Mike Perry versus Yancy Medeiros, baby. I love it. I love this fight. I love it. Just two guys that are willing to go in there. Mike Perry, just a savage, hits like a Mack truck. And then you have Yancy Medeiros, one of Hawaii's own, Max Holloway's training partner, has also trained with the Diaz brothers. Also one of those guys that goes in there, fight of the year contender kind of guys. However, keeps it a little bit more technical than Mike Perry. So we'll see the gains that Mike Perry makes, or we'll see if Yancy Medeiros can technically just outclass this guy. And we'll see. We'll see. It's a wonderful fight. The fight that they were trying to rile up was Emil Meek versus Mike Perry. I like that fight even more in the sense that these guys aren't as technical. Like, Emil isn't as technical as Yancy is on the feet, but his power, he's got power, just like Mike Perry's a little bit more athletic than Mike Perry, but that idea of just like these guys going back and forth in wild exchanges is more likely than in the Yancy Medeiros fight. We have a real chance of Yancy Medeiros in and out movement, kind of like Max Holloway picking this guy apart. But we'll see. And then real quick, I was just in the news, and it kind of grabbed my attention because it's very uncharacteristic, but we saw what happened the last time that this happened, and it just blows my mind that this is happening. But Wonder Boy, not necessarily talks shit about Darren Till, but doesn't really think much of him. In quotes. He doesn't really think much of him was kind of the basis of what he was saying. And it kind of blew me away. Like, he wasn't impressed with Darren Till. And it blew me away because why are you saying that? Did you not see what happened with Donald Cerrone? Did you not see these people that just underestimate their opponent? And Darren Till's definitely not one to underestimate. How can you not look at his kickboxing record or previous kickboxing matches and think he's the threat? It blows my mind. Darren Till was like, are you serious? You serious right now? I mean, you're the one that took the fight. If you didn't think I was that big of a deal, then why are we doing this main event in Liverpool besides money reasons? I think it's an easy paycheck, I guess, but I mean, this guy is pretty much I don't know. It blew me away that Wonder Boy could even think that way, and it just doesn't seem like him. But we'll see. We'll see. So, the biggest news that hit this past weekend that came out last Wednesday, during the afternoon, Thursday, or actually came out last Wednesday or Thursday. Um, and it's a rumor right now by Therese, uh, like that Therese something.com. Uh, I don't know. That's why it's a rumor. It's kind of one of these TMZ less reliable, maybe Therese own site thing. I don't know. It's where most, you know, rumors of celebrities come out of. Anyway, they rumored that the UFC is reaching a TV deal with ESPN and NBC, and this deal is worth 320 million, 160 mil each year. Um, the big thing about this is NBC and ESPN are going to pay for production, where the UFC has paid for the production up until this point. So that means they can take a little bit more of the pressure off the UFC to promote all these fighters. Now, what that feeds into is that each network, like HBO and Showtime, are going to have rights to certain fighters, just like Deontay Wilder has rights to Showtime, or HBO Boxing has rights to certain guys. The best one is Showtime, because Showtime has everybody right now, right? So Showtime has Canelo, Triple G, all these guys, and then certain others, ESPN, or I think ESPN has their own too, and HBO have their own boxing, right? So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at these different networks taking over and taking more of the brunt of the production and marketing side of it. So that way the UFC is not doing everything, and they've got over 500 fighters on their roster. It's very hard to split it up. But if you can get two professionally, I mean, obviously they're professional, but two, network companies that have proven that their, production team is worth a shit, to take over, hands on, or, more for us. So on top of that, NBC will control streaming as well. So any streaming events such as Fight Pass fights, which I'm going to change into, they're taking over Fight Pass. So NBC is now going to be in charge of Fight Pass. And then the Contender Series, so where Sean O'Malley came from and some of these guys, Mickey Gall, came from, is going to take over the Ultimate Fighter. I'm a huge fan of that. It's shorter. I don't need the reality show anymore. We've done it. There's no more premises that we can get from it, and no one really fucking watches it anyways. So moving on from that, we're getting the Contender Series, which has been a hit. I mean, with the Snoop Dogg and Uriah Faber commentary, I know not a bunch of fighters are fans of it, but the average American fan, or average American that's going to watch it, would be a fan of that, as well as it cuts the shit. We find out who these fighters are, they fight, and then if they win, they may or may not get a contract. So it's just an extra night of fights, right? It would be like, oh, sweet, we get to watch a bunch of basketball players, train for the upcoming game this weekend, by doing just like not a one-on-one, but 3-on-3 basketball with some of the high. I mean, it's not as exciting, but what you're essentially doing is you're getting something to feed that appetite of fights until the weekend. And it's not as jam-packed with, commentary and play-by-play. It's more just, here are the fights, we're going to tell you what's going on. If you want to hear your own side of it, then here's Snoop Dogg. Or if you want to hear a funny, more entertaining side of it, here's Snoop Dogg and Uriah Faber drinking gin and juice and smoking blunts. If not, you can listen to Paul Felder and that new guy. But either way, I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a huge, huge fan of the Contender Series. So, I love it. And then, the big news, pay-per-views being reduced to 6 times a year. I think that means they're just going to do more on ESPN and NBC and do a little bit more on cable. And then make real big events 6 times a year. I don't mind it, but the way that you're going to have to look at it is, we typically get a pay-per-view each month. We may have 1 or 2 months that we don't have a pay-per-view. So you're essentially cutting the pay-per-views in half. As a fight fan, I don't really care. Sure, it means I don't have to pay as much as often, and I can watch my fights with friends at home more often for free, or I can go to the bar, watch them for free there. Uh, Obviously I'm not watching them for free because I'm paying for cable, but what essentially that does, it just stream, especially if NBC takes over the streaming aspect of it, then it can just streamline and everything to that product. Because if you have cable, you definitely have NBC and ESPN. And then more likely, when you want to watch something online, instead of having to, download this UFC Fight Pass app, if you're a fan of NBC, you just go on the NBC website and take care of it. So, yeah, I see this as a good thing. If you're a fan of pay-per-view events, obviously not the greatest thing in the world, but 6 times a year, not that big of a deal, right? And then one of those 6 is our Super Bowl. So I personally like it. So that's pretty much the news. That's pretty much the MMA news this week. It hasn't really been that wild. It's been recovering from this past weekend, and then it's unloading onto this weekend. I hate that they do this. It doesn't make any sense. They did a while where it was like they did a couple weeks for UFC 223, and we all felt good. We were like, yeah, I'm ready for fights again. Now they're doing this bullshit again. One fight this weekend, last weekend, and we just got over the whole fights. To me, are bigger than basketball. They're bigger than football. They're bigger than these wins that happen weekly after week after week. You can cover those easily. These fights are so full of emotion and so full of personal lives and stories and physical grit, mental grit, emotional grit, all these things tying into one, and then you're trying to bunch all that information into your consumer's ear and fans' ear, and then on top of that, you have to watch them fight it out, which is mentally exhausting to like watch, more or less physically exhausting to have happen. And then you expect them to just like turn around and then do the same thing again next week. This is Edson Barboza and this is Kevin Lee and this is why you should watch them. And then try to fit that into a week and then turn it on Saturday night. It's very hard for the average person to care and then have to care about someone else again when you watch this amazing fight of the year potential candidate, and then you're just like, oh my god, I gotta watch everything about Justin Gaethje. I gotta watch everything about Dustin Poirier. And that shit can take up to a week of digesting. But then they want you to get into the Kevin Lee, Edson Barboza. It's like you have one friend that's like super into something, right? If you're into comedies, like you just tell your friend like, man, you should really listen to Dimitri Martin, right? And this person gets into Dimitri Martin, and they're like, oh shit, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And you're like, all right, cool. If you like comedy, then try this out. Whoa. I'm still not done with this, man. It's the same thing. Like, you're eating a meal, and you're like, shit, this strawberry shortcake is the bomb. And you're not even halfway through it, and someone's like, you think strawberry shortcake's the bomb? Try this shit out. Next thing you know, you're like trying to force feed yourself cake and cookies and all this stuff, and it just doesn't taste good after that. You're now just like, oh, now it just tastes like sugar and everything tastes the same. And you don't want MMA to be the same. So take a break. You should take a break in between each fight. So this week, there should be no fights this weekend. If Bellator wants to throw on an event, then Bellator throws on an event, which I'm pretty sure they are. If boxing wants to have an event, which they do, Jamal Charles is fighting this weekend. Amir Khan's fighting again this weekend. Pretty big boxing. Let the boxing world have it. Then the week following, come back with something. This is just too much. And the next pay-per-view isn't until May. So you have some time. You don't need to throw these back to back. That being said, I'm still super excited about this card this weekend. It's actually a really good card. Compared to last week's card, name value-wise, this one holds up. Name value-wise, star power, and just overall excitement on fighters. There hasn't been any late notice replacements on this one. Besides, I think, Frankie Edgar. Yeah, I think. I think that was all just messed up on that thing. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get into the card. I'm mostly going to just go over the main card. I'll give you the keys to victory. I don't want to dive too deep into these. I'll do more of that from pay-per-views and real big fight cards. These I just want to go over. Like I said, we don't have a lot of time to digest and regurgitate stuff over and over and over again since these fights are back-to-back. So I just have to go ahead and give my analysis. I mean, I watched all these guys' last fights and fights that I think their opponent, replicates, like past opponents that they fought that kind of replicate this upcoming opponent. I just see how they deal with, let's say if the fighter that they're fighting this weekend is tall, lanky, and has great jiu-jitsu skills. Well, I try to find someone in that fighter's past that kind of replicates the same skill and see how they deal with whatever that opponent brings. If they don't have anyone in that's fine. I look at their past fight because you can look at how they fought 10 years ago or 3 years ago. It's not an accurate representation. They've definitely gotten better. If they haven't gotten better, then they're probably not fighting right now. So, let's get into it, shall we? Once again, this podcast, not sponsored by, but thanks to Charlotte Jiu-Jitsu Academy with John Piper out there down the road, as well as UFC Gym down in Matthews, where I coach at, with Billy Alexander and Jose Davia. We're some of the coaches there. So if you're ever in the area, swing on by. We'll show you some stuff. And then on top of that, Pete's Coffee once again. Keeping me awake this morning. So, our first fight, why don't we start with Jim Miller versus Dan Hooker. And then we'll get to the main event. All right, so Jim Miller versus Dan Hooker is a great fight, personally, for Dan Hooker, I think. He's coming off of a win in his last fight. I literally just watched it the other day. But he's also got a spectacular knockout win over Ross Pearson, which is what I'm going to lean more towards on this fight. So, Ross Pearson, not necessarily the same kind of fighter as Jim Miller, but in that older vet kind of category. Dan Hooker, I'm trying to think who he fought in his last fight. It was he actually showed. It's bothering me that I can't remember. Oh, that's who it was. He choked out. He's a big deal. Not a big deal, but he's one of these upcoming prospects. You guys listening right now are just screaming at me who this is. DeCasey. Mark DeCasey. Whoa. Yeah, Mark DeCasey. If Dan Hooker beat Mark DeCasey, I don't really see I don't really see where Jim Miller strives where Dan Hooker or strives in a place where Dan Hooker lacks. When it starts standing, I give the edge to Dan Hooker, and when it goes to the ground, I give the edge to Jim Miller, but taking Dan to the ground is going to be very difficult. I think Dan, he's obviously going to avoid the ground with knees, elbows. Jim being the shorter fighter, he's going to have to get in there with his boxing, and the greatest way to nullify boxing is with knees and elbows if you're a taller, lankier fighter. Obviously, he's got to keep him away. Use that Muay Thai. Dan Hooker trains with Israel Adesanya in New Zealand, as well as being a TMT fighter, a Tiger Muay Thai fighter. I just see his versatility in striking, and he's gonna have submission threat as well. If he goes to his back, he's submitted people, triangle chokes, guillotines as well. So I don't see if Jim Miller gets him on the ground, if he's gonna be in danger, he'd probably just pop right back up to his feet, find a way to stand up, or he'll just attack with submissions off his back to threaten it, so Jim doesn't want to be there. What Jim needs to do, be a crafty vet, take it to the ground, use feints, get inside, feint his way inside, and feint his way feinting with takedowns, or with his hands, mixing both up. I take Dan Hooker in this fight. Like I said, versatility, win streak, confidence, looking great at 155. I just think this is where he needs to be. He used to be a 145er, but I think 155 is where he'll strive. Which he is. He's on this win streak already. All right, so Aljamain Sterling versus Brett Johns, the Welsh, um, the Welshman. Brett the Pikey Johns is become one of my not favorite bantamweights, but one of these guys. It's like I can't wait to watch Brett Johns fight. His last fight, he won by calf slicer in the most unique takedown defense way that being a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I've seen that position before. Like it's one of those things where when you compete or when you train or when you spar and you get in these positions and the adrenaline's going, you go to what is most comfortable to you, but that doesn't mean you don't see different angles. He got put in this position where he has to train it. It has to be almost instinct for him because it's not that hard to do. It's just when the moment is right, can you be clear-minded to attack it, or is it just naturally instinctual, like this is what you do? John Jones is one of those guys that in the moment he can throw things up, he can do things. It's, he's very creative, he's very calm, composed in that moment, so he's able to throw different things. He obviously practices it, but he doesn't practice spinning back elbows 1,000 times a day. He probably doesn't practice spinning back elbows as much as he practices his jab, right? And same thing with this kind of move. Brett Johns probably practices it a lot, but not as much as he practices just takedown defenses, it's like considering sprawls or whatever. So you're talking about a guy with a very high fight IQ and a guy who's comfortable in there, who likes being in there. He's willing to take a risk for a gigantic reward. That's dangerous in the UFC. That's dangerous in MMA in general. Joe Rogan's famous quote on what MMA is. It's high stakes problem solve, or it's high stakes problem solving with dire consequences. It's, exactly what it is. It's extreme, it's extreme problem solving, but with these consequences that either can end a fight in a second or can essentially, even worse than that. But that being said, on my soapbox of who Brett Johns is, he's fighting one of the better bantamweight fighters in the division, Aljamain Sterling. Talking about a guy that trains with the Ray Longo guys. So, he's with Matt Serra. He's with Matt Serra. He's with Ray Longo in that camp in Jersey. So Ali Quinta, Chris Weidman, Gian Vellante, all those guys. When it comes to training partners, nobody better. Or they're obviously better, but he's not lacking in the talent department for his training partners. That's what I'm trying to say. However, his last fight was not a great fight against Marlon Moraes. He got clipped hard in the very beginning and then got shut out with a beautiful knee/kick in the first round. Wasn't the best thing in the world, but if anyone's going to learn anything from that, it's Brett Johns. Marlon Moraes being the shorter fight in that fight and keeping it standing and really just getting on the inside and ignoring Aljamain Sterling's kicks and all that crap, and then just getting inside, landing the shots, and making sure to stay on top the whole entire time whenever Aljamain went for takedowns, and then just keeping it on the feet and catching him with that knee to the face. It was not great, but what does Brett Johns have to do to secure victory in this? His key is set up his hands to get to that takedown that he likes to. Personally, I don't think he's going to be able to get the takedown on Aljamain unless he wears him out, gets him against the fence, and pulls him down and grinds him out. I think it's a really good game plan to proceed on him, just like he did in Albert Moraes' game plan against a taller fighter. Backs him up against the cage, connects the hands, dumps him, stays on top, works the ground and pound. And then by the third round, he can open up with his strikes because he can just feint and stuff. However, I think Brett Johns, I think getting on the inside and doing work, his hands are fast. He's got good defense. I think he's got a good chance of nullifying that kicking game that Aljamain has and really just putting the boxing pressure on him. For Aljamain, slow the pace down. Don't let Brett Johns, just get in, get out. Use the feints and stuff. Keep him away with the kicks, lateral movements. Don't engage so much. Kind of just stifle him for the first round. Really keep the pace to himself. Work and develop a rhythm that Aljamain can get into by the second, third round. And then pick him apart every time that every time that Brett Johns comes in. Use knees to not let him, grab a hold of the single or double leg or push him against the cage. Use knees, circle out, kind of like Joe Duffy did with, who is it? Who was that one fighter? Anyway, every time that the guy came in for a takedown, he'd switch stances to a switch knee and move out of the way. It was perfect. That's what you need to do with a shorter fighter who can shoot on you. And wrestling with shorter fighters, or with wrestling with shorter wrestlers even, and a lot of people that train will know this, it sucks because when they drop level, it's so quick they don't have to drop as far. So it's a little bit harder to defend a takedown, especially if they're quick with it. But for me, I think Brett Johns takes this fight. I think he's just on this win streak. He's, also undefeated. And I think he just rides his confidence, and he's one to look out for in the bantamweight division. I don't think it's a loss to Aljamain in a way where Aljamain, not necessarily a freak accident like the last one. It's not necessarily freak, but I don't think he gets caught like he did in the last fight. I think Brett Johns just decisively beats him. You watch a guy that he actually, and I think you get a name to him now. I think people will be like, oh. After his last loss, it was like, oh, did you see that calf slicer? But I think after this fight, you go, oh, did you see Brett Johns? You don't see, did you see that calf slicer by that guy? I think you see spotlight on Brett Johns after this fight. So next we got David Branch versus Thiago Santos. Very good middleweight fight. Really starts the division, not necessarily moving again, but you see a top fighter versus a guy climbing the ranks. And this is a very pivotal moment for Thiago Santos. Does he move into that top 5 category? Or does he have to work his way again? Or does David Branch solidify himself where he is and then tries to pick up from his loss against Luke Rockhold? So the keys for David Branch, man, is to close the distance like he did with Luke. Get him against the fence and just box Thiago's face off like he did against Luke Rockhold. Now, Thiago Santos is definitely not going to have as good of a ground game as Luke Rockhold, so it's in David Branch's best interest to just close the distance, box him against the cage, up and down with his takedowns, up and down. Box up top, drop down for a single, double against the cage, pop back up for uppercut, hook, whatever. Just, make Thiago have to go up and down with his reactions. And Thiago just keeps the outside, body kicks the legs, slow David Branch. David Branch likes to box, so kicks the legs. Make sure to bring those kicks back as quickly as you can. And then knees. Anytime David Branch starts reaching for legs, switch the kick, feint the kick, and throw a knee instead. And then you'll have a guy reaching with his hands down and his chin up. So I think Thiago takes this. I think Thiago's on this run right now. And just like Brett Johns, keep this train rolling. All right, so next we got Justin Willis versus the Vanilla Gorilla Sherman. So Chase Sherman, he's one of my favorite heavyweights because he's entertaining as shit on Twitter. And in the cage as well. He moves very, very light on his feet for a heavyweight, weighing around 155 or 255, and used to be a defensive line in college. And he just moves. He moves like a bantamweight in the heavyweight division, kind of like Kane, but even more light on his feet. His issue though is he leaves his chin up because he fights a little tall, but he's entertaining. He He strings combinations together, fluid with his punches, and just he's had his ups and downs in the he's had his ups and downs in the cage. Last loss to, I forget his name, but Russian Cat clipped him with the left hook. It was there all night, and when I mean all night, I mean the very first round for 30 seconds, for like a minute or whatever, and then he just kept that chin high and got caught, and got clipped. He's going against Justin Willis. Justin Willis is also a former college football player. Trains at AKA, however. I started watching his fights. I didn't really know much about him. He's got 2 fights in the UFC, and man, he looks good. He's a heavyweight to keep your eyes on. This guy, his striking is incredible. He does his last fight that I watched mimicked a guy that was kind of like Chase Sherman, however a little bit he didn't weigh as much. He could have been a light heavyweight, but he fought his similar way, head up, a little bit taller. And man, if Justin Willis being a left or being a southpaw, what he's going to need to do to Chase Sherman is use his jab, his right hand. Since Chase Sherman being orthodox, right, he was getting clipped with the left hook in his fights. He always gets clipped with the left hook. He keeps his chin high, and it's always there. As fighting against the orthodox, it's right there to hit them. Perfect. So for Justin Willis, what he needs to do is, as Chase Sherman throws either a jab or a hook, he has to come over the top of the right hook to set up the left hand and go straight down the middle. That straight punch, that right straight down the middle, is going to be money for Justin Willis all night. For Chase Sherman, he's going to have to stand switch. He's going to have to go in and out movement, pick them apart, start at the body, start at the legs, go in and out like he did with Rashad Coulter, and not get enticed to a brawl, and not get enticed to just throwing hands in the pocket. He's going to have to use his stance switching to nullify that right hook or left hook, whatever. That stance switching he's going to have to use it to not get hit by a straight or any of that kind of. The second punch is what's going to do it to him. It's not ever going to be the first punch for him. It's going to be that second punch. I take Justin Willis on this. I think he's incredible. Like as a up and comer right now, I think he's got a lot to offer, especially training at AKA. I think this is great. It's a great fight too. So you get Frankie Edgar versus Cub Swanson 2 for the second time. Not much to talk about this fight, considering that they've already fought, and Frankie Edgar did what he wanted to Cub Swanson until the very last couple seconds of the fight. And these guys are so vet-oriented that you can watch all their fights from that point on. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to pick up maybe a couple tools and tricks and put them into their pocket, but they're the same fighter. Cub Swanson has got a couple wins, couple losses since then. Frankie Edgar got a couple wins, couple losses since then. So, what is the big difference between these two right now, then, and why is this fight interesting? It's their last fight. Their last fight, they had the same opponent. In front, Brian Ortega, with 2 different outcomes. You had Cub Swanson fight Ortega and lose in the second round by submission. By submission. And then you had Frankie Edgar getting knocked out in the first round. So, nothing to take away from Brian Ortega, because obviously he got both of these guys. But, I mean, that was not a good day for either of those guys. But he exploited a hole that a lot of fighters don't have, or a lot of fighters were showing. And Brian Ortega kind of just, capitalized on those holes. Right? Every time that Brian Ortega would get close to Cub would duck his head, and that's where that guillotine attempt came from. And then with Frankie Edgar would come in and out, and then Brian just timed it with that elbow. He was trying to hook him. He was trying to hit him with the hook, right? But he realized that he was too far, or it was too close. And Brian, having longer limbs, he was just like, change it to elbow. So for Swanson, what's the key and the game plan for this? He's got to do submission. He's got to complete submission threats off his back. He can't sit on his back like he did last time in half guard and just lay there. He either has to get the feet on the hips, work back to guard, and then work submissions off his back to force Frankie to stand up or posture up or create space so that way he can stand back to his feet. Cub Swanson obviously has an issue with submissions. His last two, or the Edgar fight is one, this fight, or his last fight's another. And his Edgar fight, that sucked too, because he had 5 seconds left in that match. And not necessarily he would have won, but just 5 seconds left. And then obviously Ortega just took advantage of Edgar Swanson sticking his neck out. He's got to do more. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well. He's got to show his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt off his back. He's got to threaten that. He's got to threaten. Regardless if Frankie Edgar gets caught in it or not, he's just got to threaten it so he can get back to his feet. And then that's where this fight takes a turn for me. He needs to capitalize on the fact that Frankie Edgar was knocked out not that long ago. That sounds really bad, but you look back at the Kevin Gastelum versus Michael Bisping fight. Michael Bisping got knocked down and then choked out, and then you see his next fight against Kevin Gastelum, he gets slept. Like bad. Like bad. So what that makes me think is Frankie Edgar's chin is a little suspect right now. Frankie Edgar even said he wasn't sparring in practice because he's not trying to take damage. Well, you're about to fight, so I don't know. I don't know if that necessarily makes a difference. I think Cub Swanson hitting hard as fuck for that weight class, especially because he throws everything with his whole body. He needs to capitalize on that. This is a chance for Cub Swanson to right a wrong of that loss, regardless of when this fight is taking place. He's got a really good chance now to lay leather on Frankie Edgar and put him out. For Frankie Edgar, same game plan as before. Hands to takedown, chain wrestle, beat him up on the ground, and then just do what he did before. He didn't lose a round in that fight, so I have Frankie winning again because, I mean, that fight was blueprint on just how to beat Cub Swanson. I mean, he did everything right. He got clipped a little bit, but no danger. Took him down, did what he wanted. Frankie Edgar style. And that takes us to the main event. The main event. You have Kevin Lee versus Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza being number 4 in the world in the lightweight division, and Kevin Lee being number 7. Both these guys' last losses have been to the current UFC lightweight champions. Plural. Edson Barboza losing to Khabib in a decisive beatdown. And then Kevin Lee losing to Tony Ferguson due to triangle choke in the 3rd round. Kind of gassing from that as well. So, in this fight, what are the keys for Edson Barboza to win and get back on this winning track? Well, he can't have flashbacks to Khabib in this fight. He can't be hesitant with throwing kicks. He can't be on the back foot like he was with the Khabib fight. That's just going to set up takedowns for Kevin Lee, and Kevin Lee has all the digital footage that he needs to figure out how to make that work for him. He just needs to work on the takedown defense. I mean, Eddie Alvarez is on his team. He's got a lot of people on his team that, you know, give him a hard time when it comes to takedowns. So is Kevin Lee on the same level as Khabib, or is he more on the same level as Eddie Alvarez? So if he's on the same level as Eddie Alvarez, it's not like he won't be able to get a takedown. But we've seen what happens when people take Edson Barboza down minus Khabib. He pretty much gets back to his feet. He works on it. It's almost impossible to hold him down. And then he can follow things up with, like, Beneil Dariush style. So that's the keys. He needs to use the knees to stifle the boxing and the takedowns of Kevin Lee. Give him something to threaten. Kevin Lee has a longer range, so Kevin Lee's looking to put those hands on Edson to set up those takedowns. So if Edson can use his knees in a long jabbing motion to keep him away, use his kicks, use his teeps, attack the body, gas Kevin Lee out, don't let him get a chance to keep on going for those takedowns, strip him away and move away. And then that will eventually set up a Dariush kind of finish, right? Dariush jabbed at Edson to drop level, and Edson, as he saw that, jumped level and flying knee Dariush. It's a very big possibility of happening. He also has to stay on the outside, use kicks, and then set up those kicks with punches if he wants to be aggressive, right? You can't just back up. Hold on. He can't just back up and then try to set and throw kicks. He's got to go forward and throw kicks. Every time he backs up to throw kicks, he wastes energy, and then that's when he gets caught with getting taken down. For Kevin Lee, learn from Khabib. Do exactly what Khabib did, but with better technical striking and cage cut a lot better in the beginning of the fight. But always, always walk Edson back. Kevin Lee's jab is going to be longer than Edson Barboza's, so he can just walk him down, use leg kicks of his own, set up takedowns with his hands, with his kicks actually, as well. Feint, and make Edson back up. Make Edson back up, set, try to throw. You're going to tire him out that way. This is a battle of tiring. Who's going to get tired first? Because the first person that gets tired is going to make a mistake. The mistake that Kevin's going to make when he's tired is he's going to drop down for a takedown at the wrong time, and he's going to pay for it. Edson, if he's tired, he's going to make the mistake of letting a takedown happen. Kevin's going to take his back and submit him. Who do I think makes the greater mistake first? I think Edson makes the greater mistake first. I'm going to go with Kevin Lee on this fight. I think Edson, fighting a guy that is going to try to maul him the same way that Khabib did, is going to bring back not great memories, just like Michael Johnson got submitted by Darren Elkins in the first round in his fight. As soon as Darren Elkins took him down, I think you get this PTSD kind of like Edson Barboza, where he's kind of hesitant on throwing kicks. He's hesitant on being Barboza, and Lee is going to do work. And I think that sets up a good fight for Lee and maybe Eddie Alvarez. That'd be great. Lee and Eddie Alvarez. So stay on the inside for Kevin Lee and apply that pressure. All right, guys. So I've got Kevin Lee winning, Frankie Edgar, Justin Willis, Thiago Santos, Brett Johns, and Dan Hooker. Those are all my winners in these fights. I think pretty good picks, actually. So get to the betting machines and put your odds in. These fights I will be watching this weekend. So let's be on the lookout this Sunday for another episode of Post-Fight Breakdown. This Sunday I'll do one of the fights this past weekend. And then I'll kind of start getting into the next UFC event. It will be in Rio. You've got Raquel Pennington versus Amanda Nunes for the Women's Bantamweight Championship. But until then, guys, until this Sunday, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and I look forward to breaking them down with you later.